And a lot of, when I show the picture at the end of the book, which is in the author's notes to the kids when I'm reading it, they're like, so, I live on the East Coast, and they're like, well, wildfires, like, what can we do about wildfires? Like, how can we affect that owl? And I'm like, oh, everything we've done has already affected this owl, and we can do more, and we are doing more to help it. But it's incredible conversation to talk about how connected we really all are. And now I think it's more important than ever.
Hello, and welcome to another You May Contribute a Verse. I'm Josh Munkin, alongside co-host Brenna Jennerette and podcast wizard John Seymour for a conversation with Cedar Pruitt. Cedar is intentional, prepared, thoughtful, well-researched, and just an absolute, a hoot, you might say, I actually didn't plan that pun, a hoot to talk to in this conversation about lots of things. First and foremost, her book Fireflight, which came out at the beginning of last year, 2024. Fireflight, illustrated by Chiara Fedele. I also want to shout out her upcoming book, which sounds amazing, and you'll have to wait until the end of the conversation to hear about that. Her second book is coming in 2026. It's titled What Marcel Found, The Incredible Discovery of the LASCAUX Cave Paintings. Cedar just was a real blast to talk to. Really, really hope you enjoy what Cedar has to say and the wisdom she has to offer. But first, a word from our sponsor. We are sponsored, as usual, by Tealmore Press. Tealmore is a boutique Canadian children's book publisher of several great books, beautiful books. They put care and thoughtfulness and into the production of their books, and they're really nice. Check out the latest releases, including Naked, including Supermoon, including Fungi Are More Than Mushrooms. Check out everything that Tealmore has going on at Tealmore, Tielmour press.com. And now, our conversation with Cedar.
Well, thank you for coming on. We're really excited to chat with you. Yeah.
It's really great.
Brendan was telling me this has been a long time coming. Which everybody is that who we end up talking to. Everybody has to wait, and we have to wait.
It's so nice. It's such an honor to be on, really. I really admire your show.
Come on. Thank you.
I love the title. It's so creative and fun. It's just great. I'm really excited.
Thank you.
It was born of a lawsuit threat. So
is that true? Wait, truly tell me the story of where you got this title, because I love it.
I think I've told this before, but it's
podcast origins.
Yeah.
It's buried in the archive somewhere. If I have told the story before, but it was originally called, when I did the podcast myself, and Brenna had her own podcast focused on other things. It was called What It Takes to Make, and it was like a general purpose creativity podcast. So I had talked to people who were documentary directors and dance company owners and musicians and all this sort of thing.
The creatives, yeah.
Yeah, the creatives. And it was a blast. And then I got a takedown notice from another podcaster that had a similar name, and they actually had their stuff together, had trademarked their similar name, and it scared the pants off me. And so I spent a weekend sort of figuring out, like, what the heck can I do that's going to indemnify me or protect me from future potential legal action? Yeah. So in case you are listening, and for you, Cedar, and then for anybody else that listens to this that hasn't heard that story before, I'm just going to use the other term. You May Contribute a Verse is the last line of a Walt Whitman poem called "Oh Me, Oh Life," and I picked it because it is super poignant to me and super relevant to what we're doing. The gist of the poem is all about why should we bother to try? Why should we bother to be creative? Because we all may contribute a verse to the great poem that is the world. So that's where that came from.
That's so funny, because I think of that line. I love Walt Whitman, and I'm so glad you told me that story. But I think of that line as being very, it's like about rap, You may contribute a verse.
It's rap.
And I'm like, this is so great. I finally get to be,
amazing.
In the whitest creative poetry rap world that I want to be in.
And the whitest white poet, pre-rap poet. Is this where you tell us that Walt Whitman was a Lil Walty was his rap name or something?
Yeah. Oh my God.
This is like
amazing.
Hidden history.
What? Here comes Walt.
Amazing. Oh my God.
I'm sorry, Walt. I'm sorry, the estate of Walt Whitman.
It's a great idea. And I'm sure every creative person wonders, why am I doing this? What is the point of this? Is this worth it?
Daily.
So it's a never ending thing to, I think, be transparent about and talk about and,
Totally. We just
accept that as part of the process.
I mean, that is a great note to sort of start on. Like the last episode that we published was with Brian LaRosa of Scholastic, one of the creative editors over there. I heard that. Yep. Yeah. And he talked about imposter syndrome a little bit when we chatted with him. And I feel like, this very much sort of speaks to that, what are we all doing here? Why is it that we have we make podcasts about it and we write books and we chat about it and we Zoom and talk and there's, Slack channels and Discord and all this stuff. And why? So on that note, let's talk about your stuff because,
why?
Why do you, tell us why, Cedar. Tell us why. No, but I mean, let's start, at the beginning, how did you get into Kidlit? I know you write a lot of nonfiction. Why did you go that route? Yeah, let's chat about it.
I haven't. That's just what's been published, but yeah.
And how many steps do you think you have between this part of your career and breaking into rap?
Oh, I know.
Amazing. Great question. Way to connect the dots.
I think there's a lot of steps, Josh. A lot of steps.
I don't know.
But
I've seen TikToks where people will rap Dr. Seuss books, and it can be very compelling with the right lyricism.
I gotta say, my book has a lot of rhythm in it, and I really respect rhythm and rhyme, And we listen to rap in my household and think very highly of it. So I'm not actually a rapper, and I never will be, but I will always respect it as as rhythm and poetry.
Yeah.
Sure.
So why for me actually was a nagging question that really has lasted my entire adult life. So I'll have an answer sometime, but I started out my 20s knowing that I wanted to be a picture book author, and I'm currently 48, and this year my first book was published. So and that whole arc has been, I was in a critique group with these amazing writers in my 20s, and they all got published eventually after I left the group. And I'm now very prolific and successful and wonderful people. And I've been inspired to see them. But I started when you wrote letters and then you got rejections in the mail.
Oh,
and
man.
Sweet, sweet days, and I went to conferences and people it wasn't as supportive of the community as it is now. It just wasn't. And I just, eventually I was like, well, I was trying with one story, and I had one story, which in retrospect, it did have a few things wrong with it. And I got some rejections, and then I was like, I just need something more black and white right now. And I want to have my own children. So I did that for 12 years, and I was a fitness instructor, and I worked full time and
ooh, cool.
Poured my creative energy into other things.
Yeah.
And then as I turned 40, I was like, no, I just am, again, it's like, I cannot get away from this wish. I don't know why. And so that's kind of became my point to come back. And, I actually grew a lot from the platform 12 by 12, where their idea is to be prolific, not to attach to one story. And that worked for me.
So hard. So hard.
Yeah. It's so hard. And I had to have 30 manuscripts and get 200 rejections before I found an agent and could move forward with this book. So, you asked about nonfiction, and I do write. I write everything. I write chapter books. I write novels for middle grade. I write picture books, and this is what's getting accepted right now. So that's good too.
Yeah.
I love
totally.
Nonfiction.
I love what you're saying though about this is a point that comes up on the podcast all the time, but not to be so precious with your work, which is gosh, it's so hard, and it's such a double-edged sword, because it's well, I have to really care about it to make it really good. Yeah. And then on the other side, I also have to just let it go and be I don't care. It's fine. Yeah. You know what I mean? But guys, that's it's so contrary, Yeah, but writing a lot. Yeah, getting it all out there. I mean, so specifically this book that has been published, let's talk about that one and how it got to publication. So did you get your agent with that story, and how did that happen?
Yeah. You got to say its name, Cedar. We always
Okay.
go way too long.
Okay.
Just for the recording. It's going to be in the show notes and all that.
Okay, yeah, of course. So Fireflight, A Wildfire Escape is the title of this book. It's illustrated by Kira Fideli and published by Capstone Editions. And it came out on January 1st of this year. And it is my first published book. I do have another book coming out in 2026 with Simon & Schuster. That'll be illustrated by David Litchfield. And it's with Beach Lane Books. So I'm just super excited. I feel so lucky.
Awesome.
And those books sold in the same week, 1 week.
Oh, that's so wild.
Will forever be book week in our household.
That's a great week. Wow.
I know. And unfortunately, it was 2 years ago. So I really look back on that. I'm like, oh my gosh, can we have another book week? I have much more work.
Totally.
I want to talk about Fireflight, but I mean, how soon did you know that the David Litchfield book, whose name we have not said yet, that comes out in 2026, how soon did you know that you were going to have to wait 4 years for that to come out? Or did it shift?
Yes. Some of it has to do with just waiting on the illustrator. So his with Capstone, they found Kira Fideli very quickly. So she's this incredible illustrator who lives in Italy. And we really didn't have, I was always trained as a budding, hopeful picture book author that you would never have a say in the illustrations. That the illustrations were separate. And my experience has not been that at all, even a little bit. But
interesting.
With anybody. But Capstone came back and said, what do you think about this artist? And they showed me a few of her pictures. And I almost went to art school. I have a background in art myself. I'd love to do more illustration myself someday. And I was instantly enthralled. I was like, oh, done. And with the other book, it was just this a longer evolving conversation. And David Litchfield is, a spectacular, profoundly amazing illustrator for our time. And I feel so lucky. But Kira happened to be available then. And so Fireflight got fairly quickly published and completed. Whereas, David Litchfield's schedule takes time to go through. So we're getting there. I think it's in the works.
Wow.
Yeah.
And can we talk about your agent? Can we circle back to that? Like, how did you get your agent? What was that journey like? And I know you got them with the Fire book. Yeah. So more about that. Okay. I'm doing a lot of hand motions, everybody. I don't know if you can.
Yeah, I don't know how that works.
We can hear the wishing. But
there's hands everywhere.
I'm giving the art notes. I'm saying the art notes out loud with my hand.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
Woman in red sweater laughs with black headphones.
Yes, exactly. Right. And the colors are very specific. Don't try to deviate.
No. Yeah, you gotta. It's very important.
You'll never get accepted with art notes that are that specific.
Yeah, right. This is my problem, Josh. This is what I'm up against.
Art notes. And honestly, it's such a mystery, isn't it? This whole art note thing. Because people get very hung up on it. And then some people get very specific about what you need to do. But the truth is somewhere in between, right? Like,
yes,
I've had editors come back and say, oh, please add some art notes here. And I'm like, really?
Yep.
Okay. But then I'm happy to,
Totally. Yeah. You never know. You never know.
No, you never know. Yeah. It completely varies. Okay. So with Fireflight, A Wildfire Escape, I was actually reading the paper, the old fashioned way, sitting with my family on New Year's Day, and it was snowing all around me. It was 2021. And I had been writing for children since 2018, trying every day. Right. And I was in a critique group. I was writing a picture book draft that was complete every month, but many more than that, really. And working as much as I could while, working in a job and everything else. But just really wanting to make this as much of a focus as it could be on the side. And so I think I was primed to start to really look and hunt for stories because I found this tiny little article in the New York Times. It was actually a paragraph in an op-ed on how there were wonderful things in 2020, and some of them had to do with animals. And 2020 was not like the easiest year, but there were these were cool moments with these animals. There was a moose that rescued someone, and an owl that flew into a helicopter in a wildfire. And I read this little tiny article, and I basically, the California wildfire, a screech owl flew out of the flames and it flew into this tiny open window in this working firefighting helicopter that was hovering above the flames. And the pilot was dropping water onto the flames. And the owl landed in the empty co-pilot seat. And the pilot, while piloting by himself, took a picture with his phone. And then that owl stayed with him for about 15 minutes while he flew back and forth, gathering water, dropping it on the flame, gathering water, dropping the flames. And then eventually that owl just left the same way it came in. And he said he watched it circle back down with no idea of how even an owl can do that against the velocity of the blades. You know, I mean, just the fact that people can't be too close to swirling helicopter blades. It's such a dramatic and moving story to me. And I think it resonated for me because I had so much empathy for having to leave your home when you're not ready, you know, for kids, for adults, for animals, for everybody. But, you know, I think the resonance of that story, since I've been reading it, or, you know, to kids around the country and, you know, hearing about it being checked out, and it sold out of its first print run in 2 weeks, which was really amazing. It's had some wonderful successes. And I think it connects with people because there's also a picture, this incredible picture that the pilot took. And that actually went viral. And I didn't even know it. When I encountered this story, it was in print. But, you know, he has this picture of this owl just looking at him. And behind it, its home is burning. And, you know, wildfires are such a scary, difficult problem. And they're so dangerous. And I think we just are still kind of struggling to find the words to describe it. And that moment of connection kind of encapsulated something, I think, important in what we're doing. You know, here's this pilot trying to save this situation. And also we helped create it with climate change. So we're in a real bind. And, you know, I thought it was very, very powerful. And a lot of, you know, when I show the picture at the end of the book, which is in the author's notes to the kids when I'm reading it, they're like, so, you know, I live on the East Coast, and they're like, well, wildfires, like, what can we do about wildfires? Like, how can we affect that owl? And I'm like, oh, everything we've done has already affected this owl, and we can do more, and we are doing more to help it. But it's incredible conversation to talk about how connected we really all are. And now I think it's more important than ever.
Yeah, like the story is like so inspiring. And it makes me think a little bit about how, you know, like people talk a lot about like, oh, but you know, like what if somebody else has my idea, or what if we write about the same thing? Yeah. And I think I'm just listening to you tell the story, and I'm thinking if I came across that story, I would read it and be really inspired and be like, wow, that's really cool. And probably like have moved on. Like, I don't know if I would have connected those same dots. So I love that you sort of felt this like immediate connection and knew where to take that story, because it just proves that we need all stories, all authors, all perspectives, you know, like it's really inspiring that you were able to take that inspirational piece and then sort of build it out into this bigger thing that really touched people.
And I love that you say that, and that you say it like that, because I feel like I was much more deliberate about other works that I've written. But in this case, it's kind of, I put it in my story idea list, and then about a month later, a poem just poured out of me. And that poem isn't fully represented in this book, of course. I wrote this poem, and I wrote it for myself, and I just felt very moved. And it's a very it's a lot about fire, and you know, it's a more somber kind of ending than, I mean, it's not an easy situation, and it's not an easy poem, but I really loved it. And I shared it with a critique partner, and good friend of mine. And she was like, you should probably go further with this. And I was surprised by that reaction, because I had stories that I felt were more like picture books. You know what I mean? And this didn't feel like it's also, it kind of worked its way into the nonfiction world, and kind of a way that not all nonfiction authors, I think, do, which is to imagine what it would be like to burst out of those trees, to be in this helicopter. I didn't want to personify the owl in any way, but I did want to try to empathize in the most human way I could. And so I was doing all this, and I sent it to Mary Cummings of Great River Literary, and she wrote back, and I was shocked because I was just thought, well, this is just a poem, and maybe she might respond to it, but I don't know. You know, I had gotten again more than 200 rejections on stories I felt were pretty strong, and
totally, yeah.
And she said, hey, Cedar, can you rewrite this as prose? And my first reaction was like, no. But then I wrote, no, I was like, maybe I should try. And I rewrote when I wrote the first line, which is, in a California forest grew a fire. I was like, oh, I can write this as prose.
And then lyrical prose, right? So it's not lyrical too prose. Much of a poem.
Yes. And
rappable,
it wove back in.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. Rap. Yeah. That's right.
Being the focus.
That's all coming back to that.
Yes.
I'm gonna force it. I'm gonna force it back to that.
Oh, no. You don't have to. It's just there. It's natural.
Yeah. It's totally natural.
Yeah, for sure. I don't want to skip over this part. Can you take us through I sent it to Mary Cummings at Great River Literary? Because it sounds the way that you put it, very sort of like offhanded and informal.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get connected with Mary, and what did this look like? Did it look like a formal query?
Yeah, right. And alternately, did you also send, did you send this out sort of wide? Like, did you query it to a bunch of other agents or were you like, oh, Mary's, she might like this? Great
questions. I had already sent Mary a few things and had gotten passes on them, and nothing like, oh, send me more or anything like that. And
no encouragement whatsoever. You're like,
the door was not
I got
open.
You. Yeah. I got you, Mary. Yeah, the door was securely closed, and I was like, I'm just gonna keep. I like that gusto, Cedar. I'm here for it.
I wrote you a poem. I'm going to slide it under the closed door.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Through the keyhole.
Yep. Well, she's such a friendly person. She's such a positive, friendly person. And I think I just thought, maybe she'll like this. That same friend who encouraged me to keep going with this story said, this agent could be good. Mary could be a good person for it. She's open to, lyrical writing. This is a little bit of an unusual story, that it's nonfiction and that it just has so many elements. And, I think it's funny. I wrote it without thinking too hard about it, and I did not send it to anyone else. I was actually querying other stories at the time, and I was really focused on those. And she's the only agent who really saw this. And then when she responded back, I was really excited and happy. So it was kind of like a one direction piece there in that sense. But she later said, hey, can I use your query as in my query? She was doing a workshop on queries. And she was like, you wrote one of the best queries I've ever seen. But when I look at it, it really isn't that much different than all the other queries I was sending out. I think I honestly was honing my querying skills because I was querying so much and so hard, and I was so hopeful. So I really do think people talk about persistence, but persistence helps you define your voice, and persistence helps you practice. And I'm not that people should be practicing on these poor agents, but I practiced on critique partners, and I took a lot of classes, and I worked very hard on my messaging for a long time before I reached out to anybody. But I think once I was in the flow of it, I was able to kind of be more effective.
So can we take the Mary relationship just a step further? So is she your agent now?
Yes, she is.
That's who you ultimately signed with. So I know a little bit about Mary. Same as what you said, like kind, very friendly, all good things. But I also know from other people that I've talked to and people who are agented by her, she tends to be a one book agent.
Right.
What has your experience been with that? Like, did you guys sign on this book and then you were like, going forward, can I send you stuff, or how did that relationship sort of unfold?
Yes, she said I would have a 6-month contract with her with one book, and that during that 6 months, I was free to send her whatever I wanted. So, as I mentioned,
interesting.
I had other work, and was very excited about that opportunity. I did have, there were certainly some voices who said, oh, you should keep searching for a career agent. But I really liked her feedback style. That's another thing. And I'm not really looking for, I don't know. Of course, I have no idea what would happen if I was with a person who said they wanted to represent everything that I wrote for life. Maybe I would be feel incredibly happy. I don't know. But in this case, it always felt good to me. Her feedback style is more about suggestion and what she sees in something without necessarily being line edits, right? So I can't describe it as either light or it's the Goldilocks. She's just right. She gives feedback where you can do it. You need to make that change. Like, and even her saying like, can you write this as prose? And then when I wrote it as prose, saying like, can you bring back in some of your poetry? Like the way she did that, it was never demanding or even frustrating, even though it sounds now like a back and forth. It wasn't. I was like, she wants to structure this for readers so that it lands with readers. And then when I did it, she said, this is perfect. Like she's great at, at recognizing when something works, and she's great at recognizing when it doesn't and being pretty clear about that. And for me, I just need direct feedback. So I really appreciated that. And in that 6-month window, I sent her the manuscript for what will become my second published book. And then she said, okay, well, why don't we sign another contract for that? So we signed another contract. And then then she went forward with like 3 or 4 more manuscripts of mine, which have gotten, a mix of things that eventually have been rejections, but definitely some conversations with editors. And they're also all mostly nonfiction, lyrical, though not entirely. And she's read a lot more of my work. So at that point, she was like, well, why don't we go forward in a contract together until it doesn't work for one of us, which I think is more normal. And when I talk to people who have lifelong career agent types, they say, oh, well, I'm like, is it, something like, oh, am I missing out on, is there something that's really different in my relationship to my agent versus your relationship? And I haven't heard that thing yet. I just haven't. Sometimes Mary will say, I'm really comfortable with just repping one book right now. Cedar, can you hold off on sending me anything else until I've worked on this one book of yours? And I'm like, oh, is that normal? And yes, lots of people have that experience. And then sometimes she says like, okay, I have more capacity. We've got 3 manuscripts out there right now. These are all really strong. Let's push these. And that's also consistent, so I don't know. For me, it works really well. I know that the relationship can change. And I hope that I get to publish as many books as I can with her. And I'm grateful for what I have, really.
It doesn't sound, in practicality, particularly different than how most of us, I imagine, experience the agent-author relationship, really. Maybe there's more contracts to sign, but that's probably just an official thing. I mean, I was talking about closed door. The door is obviously open. I mean, as long as the relationship is productive, and that's with you or with, Brennan and I, with Sharon Bell Castro and Joyce Sweeney, who, we've got whatever, lifelong contracts or in practicality, contracts as long as we both mutually feel that they're productive.
Right.
And I will say too, on that note, just as you were sort of describing it, like, yeah, it does feel very similar. And also there's a lot of sort of like overhaul and like turnover in publishing right now, right?
Yeah.
At every level, imprints are folding, new imprints are showing up, new agents are showing up, other agents are closing, they're quitting, there's all kinds of moving pieces, and myself included, and several people that I know, we're on second agents, or some people third, fourth, whatever, out of that shifting around. And I feel like the way you're describing your relationship with Mary is maybe like a more practical way to look at the relationship. Like, yeah, let's sign this, book for 6 months. Let me see what I can do. If I can't sell it, then maybe we part ways. Maybe you go with somebody who is better equipped to sell it, or maybe, you go with somebody else who wants to sell something different for you. I think really it just sort of leaves the door open a little bit more ajar for you each to sort of part your ways. And, if it's not working, that's fine. And it can be amicable and you just move on. Cause, leaving an agent is just like, it's really hard. It's really emotional. It's very like, this is a hard business anyways. And having to move on and make those breaks is like really difficult. So I think, sometimes having that clause already in there makes things a little bit easier. Cause we say this a lot, like, how are you supposed to know they're the one, like you don't get to date. You don't get to date like you do in like real life, right? You're just like jumping in and you're like, okay, I'm going to trust you with my whole career here and like everything, so like you don't really know. So in this way, it's almost sort of like a trial run. It is kind of like dating. It's like, let's date for 6 months and see what happens. You know what I mean? Like, that's sort of how I'm taking it. So I appreciate you sharing more with us because, a lot of times people will hear like, oh, one book agent, like that's a red flag. Like, I don't
stigma.
know if I want to get
Yeah.
involved, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. It's, what works best for you. And,
Yeah, I've heard that too, but I also know of people who have signed with agents who don't have a published book. They have a career agent, but that person isn't necessarily selling their book. So
Sure.
that's a challenge too. And I feel like Mary is wonderful at selling, and she knows editors, and she has relationships with editors, and she's very transparent with me about what she's doing. She really operates in a very, a way that I really respect. She does business in a way that I really respect by being transparent, by being clear about what I should expect from her, and responsive. And and I have so many writers around me who may not have those exact same experiences, and it's stifling, but it's just such a powerful relationship. I don't know. I've just never been bothered by it. I don't know what it. I think also because I have so many different things. I mean, my rap career, right, is budding. I mean, I have so many different creative avenues that I want to pursue.
Well done, Cedar. Yes. Yes.
Thank you for yes-anding my joke. My
she might want to, somebody might want to, I wouldn't want an agent to just say like, well, I can't take all of your creative stuff. You're all over the map, but
right.
Yeah. Like
but Mary is open for Hollywood to call any day.
She's fine.
She's here for it.
Yeah,
so
she's great.
Thank you, Mary Cummings. We appreciate you.
Huge thank you to her. So grateful.
Hey y'all, quick break for a couple of reviews for this week from the three of us. First, reviews from John. John reviews Whispers from Mother Earth, written and illustrated by Maryam Khalifah, which uses gentle, nature-based metaphors to help young children see their skin color as something to celebrate. The rhythmic words and colorful artwork work together to support conversations about identity and self-love. Thoughtful, accessible read-aloud for families and educators. And John gives this 5 hugs from Mother Nature out of 5. Brenna's review for this week is a preview, is for Tiny Hiker, written by Natasha Zimmers and illustrated by Jaimie MacGibbon, which is coming, I don't know if we've done this before, coming in March 2026. So spoiler alert, we've gotten to see and read and look at this, and it's very beautiful. Those are my words. Here are more of Brenna's words. This gem of a book immerses the reader in its natural beauty immediately with its vibrant, warm colors and only found in nature light angles and shadows. You'll root for the tiny hiker to make it through all kinds of obstacles on the trail, while the lyrical text beautifully weaves perseverance and resilience through its pages. Make sure to pre-order one for your nature lover or wannabe nature lover in life. And for me, Oscar's American Dream is worthy of revisiting today. The 2020 picture book written by Barry Wittenstein and illustrated by Kristen and Kevin Howdeshell sets the tone quickly by promising one experience and changing things up pretty significantly. One begins reading this book, if you're not already familiar with it, one begins reading this book with an expectation that we'll learn about Oscar's life immigrating to the U.S. and becoming some sort of noteworthy personality, as many picture book bios do. But we're done with Oscar by the third spread and never see him again, and instead get a look at 20th century American history and culture through the experiences of the corner store that originally housed his barbershop. It's a loving reminder of the melting pot that America is and should be, and how reinvention and adaptation define us rather than one path to greatness and fame. We never learn exactly what happened to Oscar, but we do get a sense for his and the corner store's legacy as we have all evolved together. Thank you for listening to those reviews and for supporting the podcast. And if you would like to continue to support the podcast, please hit up our Linktree at linktree.com/verseshow, or click any of the many links in the episode description, or go to our website at verse.show. And now to release you back into the wilds of Cedar Pruitt's conversation with us. I want to go back to something that you said, and maybe there's nothing to this, but I'm going to ask about it anyway. You said you were primed to look for stories. Like you had restarted this. This is pre-Mary, but you had restarted this sort of kidlit journey and said, like, I still want to do this. Let's do this. What made that a reality for you, or what made you primed?
I don't know. I don't even know how everybody isn't primed. Are we all like hunting for stories, creating stories? I mean, I was really hungry for a narrative. I think as I was growing up, I was very influenced by like David Byrne, but when I was 4, I loved the Talking Heads, and I'm still love the Talking Heads. When I was like 12, I was writing a lot of poetry, and Frank O'Hara was my favorite poet. And Frank O'Hara is still my favorite poet. I had voices in my head that were so powerful. And I was, I actually just got to meet Chris Van Allsburg recently, and he wrote The Garden of Abdul Ghazazi in the Polar Express and Jumanji and everything else. But his creation of The Garden of Abdul Ghazazi, again, I think I got it when it came out. We didn't have, you might be able to tell by my name, I was raised by hippies. We did not have a TV. We didn't go to the movies really. So for me, media was a remote and strange thing, and culture was fascinating. And to get a picture book like this that would like seep into my mind and help shape how I thought about the world, it's just incredible. So I think as I like kind of grew, I just knew that power is really, it's and I can attest, by the way, as a published author, that it is just as powerful as I imagined to have a child memorize my book. People send me videos of their like 2 or 3-year-old saying the words that I wrote and having memorized it and pretending to read, but they can, the whole thing. And I just, it takes my breath away. And I think, yeah, this is what I kind of, sometimes I needed, not to be over dramatic. I mean, I have a fine life, but sometimes you do need that like lifeline or, somebody to throw you a rope about how to think about the world. And words matter a lot. I just really respect them. And so I think back with so much gratitude about all the stories that helped me. And it's so nice to be a story creator. It means so much to me.
Really appreciate how you responded to that weird open-ended prompt. And that concept of like, how are we not all constantly primed is something I think about a lot. I've talked on the podcast before about being a longtime member of Toastmasters for public speaking training. And one thing that I've worked with other members on before is this notion of like, what am I going to talk about? How am I going to give a speech on something? And my response is always, how are you not going to give a speech on something? How are you empty of ideas? And maybe it takes a particular perspective to be open to the world in that way. But I'm with you.
Yeah.
There's a lot of richness out there to talk about.
Yeah.
Especially if you have kids, which you mentioned that you do have kids.
I do.
Do you get a lot of your ideas from them? And then alternately, sub question,
100%.
How do they feel about your books? Because we've asked other people on the podcast. Yeah. And we've gotten very mixed messages. So
I know. I laughed actually. The last person you interviewed was like, well, my kids are in middle school, so I don't know. But,
yeah, right.
I'm with
starting
them.
to actively dislike me.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
When I picked this back up, my youngest child was 5. And I think that, I don't know, is it just working moms or I don't know what it is. Maybe it's everybody. When your youngest is 5, it just feels like you have more space and time to do things. But also I was spending all this time with this 5 and this 8-year-old. And I actually, the way that it happened was I was, you could cut this because it's like a kind of long story, I guess, but I went to Vermont, with my kids. And I camped alone with them for a week. My husband was away and it was just the 3 of us. And,
awesome.
We were in a tent and we didn't have a camp stove. I don't know why. We cooked over a fire, which in retrospect was like, it took a long time. We would like wait and build a fire at 3 p.m. And then we would finally put a potato in it and then it would be charred and, we did all this stuff and it was so silly, but, we weren't very good at camping. It had just been a long time since I did it and a raccoon invaded our site. I mean, I don't know. We just had all kinds of adventures and misadventures, but we've done that every summer since, just like that. And when we left that situation, I felt like a different person. I wanted to write all about it. And so I just started writing about it. And I didn't know what that meant, but then eventually I was like, oh, I want to go back to my dream of writing for children. And it wasn't that I was writing for children about this experience, but I was trying to talk about what this was for me. So they are 100% the path back for me. And in fact, I've had my own, they're now 15 and 12. And so I've kind of had my own like, oh my gosh, am I going to lose all my inspiration because they're not so little? My 5-year-old in particular has been just light of ideas, and he's a writer himself. He's working on a novel. The kid writes short stories and, lots of writing, much more than I was doing when I was 12, I think. So he writes for fun and, calls his books his playground, and it's very cool.
That's
He's
cool.
very, very talented. I love it too. And so I'm just inspired by him. But I dedicated Fireflight, A Wildfire Escape to them. And I called them For My Forest Explorers. And it's about being it's about a forest on fire, but a forest. And then my second book is also about a forest. And that idea directly came from my daughter. She came home from 7th grade and she had discovered something in the curriculum. And she was like, did you know this? And I was like, you're kidding. And then I wrote, literally that day, I wrote a pretty bad story about it, which took some time to make into a little bit better. But that's my second book. So, she comes to me with many more ideas now. It's so wonderful. And she's also an incredible editor. Even with Fireflight, I found some notes where she crossed out words. She wrote in a new word, and that's the word that got into the book. And I'm like, oh my God,
wow.
don't tell Mary.
Yeah, right. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, but who better,
got
right?
a very sharp eye. And I'll tell you something else. I wrote a chapter book, and I had shown it to my critique partners already, and I'd gotten some great feedback. And I asked her if she could read it for me. And she read the first page, and she said, I just don't think this is ready for me to read. And I was like, oh, girl, I've never said that to a critique partner ever. I mean, I've never said that to a writer. And she was like, you just need to take some more time with it before it's ready for me. And I was like, okay. So I did. Wow. She was right. I mean, she was right. And I worked on it, and then she thought it was a lot better, and she gave me some real feedback. And I was like, oh my God, I really raised these people, but I really don't. They're well beyond me.
Wow. I love that. That's like a very mature, boundary to set, and like a polite way to just be like, yeah, right. Like, this just isn't, I can't invest any time in this right now. It's not ready for me.
Yeah. You need to take a little more time. Yeah. Yeah.
Very impressive. Yes.
I know. It was very sobering, but I appreciated the honesty. So, yeah.
How, okay, I'm going to do another left turn, so I cover all my ground that I want to talk about.
Yeah, you have to drive everywhere. Yeah.
Right.
Research. I put 4 stars by this because I'm interested in this, and this is connected to the kid inspiration too, because I've never thought of myself as someone who, despite having a journalism background, who would be interested in writing nonfiction, but I do find myself being attracted to it. And the research and the exploration and the explaining things to kids, which is such a part of parenthood. But how do you go about research? How did you go about researching Fireflight? This being one specific story that you're exploring. There was obviously a lot more ground, literally and figuratively, to cover. There were specific personalities who you had to include and characterize in the story. What was the process, and also, when did that overlap with your actual construction of the story itself?
As I mentioned, I wrote this poem, which was fairly unconnected to any research, and it was, I think I wrote the poem before I even saw the picture, and then I put some time into Googling it when my friend Carrie Crook encouraged me to take the poem seriously and pursue it as a story idea. And then I found this incredible picture that I put in the book, that the pilot took and went around the world. So I kind of started to follow up there. And I watched some YouTube videos of people showing what it's like to fight a fire from a helicopter. Again, I'm from the East Coast, and I didn't even really know there were firefighting helicopters. I know people drop water on fire from planes, but I just didn't know how any of this worked. So I looked into that. I read about the Creek Fire of 2020, which burned for 4 months and is the basis of this whole story. And, it's funny, even now, it's not super clear how it started, but it was out of control within 5 hours or 4 hours. It went massive in no time. And it's so crazy. And it's, I've also learned a lot about wildfires in this process and how connected they are to climate change, and just because it gets so dry, anything can happen. There's actually technically not more wildfires right now. They're just more intense and harder to put out, but it's kind of the regular number. It's just the drought allows conditions to be so much more volatile. So in terms of other research, I think I read a bit about screech owl habitat, and, you know, I've been around owls my whole life, and I'm lucky enough to get to see them sometimes in the woods by my house. So I get to, you know, I have access to animal life. Actually, that's in my little author's note in the back of my bio, and something I always ask kids about: what animals do they think I lived with during this time? Because I lived with a lot of animals, and I feel that connection very much. When Mary took this to editors and Capstone became interested, that whole process involved more research, because she would say, like, well, I just looked this up and I'm not actually sure that, are you sure the creek fire started here or here, or whatever? She fact checked me a little. And I was like, you know, I'm so sorry. That's true. I didn't read this article. I didn't read that article. In fact, there was a note in the book. I had kind of created an internal rhyme around the idea that it flew through a door, but the pilot didn't leave a door open. You know, there was a window that was open, and it flew through a tiny little window. And I'm so glad that I was able to change that even after an editor bought it. And I said, oh my gosh, we can't have this in here. So there's lots of little, it's interesting how it kind of like, you kind of have to stay on top of shifting manuscripts and facts. And it's so important to make sure that it's right. And at the same time, this nonfiction isn't the kind of nonfiction I grew up on. I didn't read a ton of nonfiction when I was growing up because it was so dry and so boring. And this is a lot of suspense and humor and wordplay and internal rhyming and rhythm. It's not at all. It's a read aloud for kids 4 to 7. It is just not dry. and it's supposed to be a jumping off point to learn more and to be curious about the world and to feel connected. But it's not about it being a dense, informative thing. You know, it's about sparking care. So that's kind of more where I was coming from.
We are totally in a nonfiction picture book renaissance at the moment. We're doing it so good.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
We're so lucky. Yeah. It's incredible.
So on that note, though, I have another question, because with nonfiction, I have a couple nonfiction pieces out on Sub, and when I was trying to figure out how to query them or how to write the pitch, they're a little bit different is what I found. I'm wondering if you found the same thing or if you changed your pitch / query at all. But what I found is sort of twofold. Like, I was told, you know, do the pitch just like a regular book. Mm-hmm. And then you also want to put, you know, something in there, like a couple of lines about like what makes you the expert on this, or like what sort of ties you to the story, and alternately, like, sort of sub question, I have also heard editors say, you know, like Source Books comes to mind specifically, that like they don't really want to publish nonfiction unless you are an actual expert in the field, or you have, you know, some kind of platform that you know, are already reaching people with. So I guess what was your experience with that, and how did you, if you had to at all, how did you, you know, sort of like present your book?
Yeah. Great questions. Yeah, I don't think I varied very much from my queries that were for fiction books. I just treated this as another amazing story. And honestly, I don't even know if I thought about it as nonfiction, because it came from a poem.
Right.
So it took a long time for me to kind of reconcile it around nonfiction. And even now, we talk about, you know, people say, oh, there's 5 types of nonfiction. And I'm like, well, are there more? You know, or is it, can that change? Like, I don't know. There's a lot of rules that are kind of being created right now around nonfiction. And I'm certainly not in a position to say that they're not all correct. And maybe I'm outside of those rules sometimes. Maybe I'm right within them, and I'm just, you know, but I think that it's a very evolving landscape, and it's incredibly exciting to see kids responding to it. And in terms of presenting it to agents and editors, I'm probably not an expert on that. I don't, you know, I think I've just tried to show that there are the most amazing stories out there, and some of them are actually happened.
Totally. Yeah. I'm with you, because a lot of it is like, you know, if I'm like excited enough about this topic, then like other people will be too, i.e. kids, right? It's great to know there are editors out there. Like at Capstone, sounds like, you know, like we're willing to work with you on this, especially it's almost like an R&R, you know, like if you're willing to sort of work with us and do the edits and whatever, you know, there's lines about free labor and all of that stuff. So I'm digressing here, but like, you know what I mean? Like a lot of people, agents, editors, whatever, they just want to know that you're willing to do the work and you're willing to sort of like work on it with them. So
yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And this is not, I mean, I'm stuck kind of thinking about your notion of 5 different types of nonfiction. This is not to say that, source books, for example, would discredit the need for more narrative nonfiction or nonfiction from, people who aren't like, I'm losing my term that I was going to use, but like, experts in the field, subject matter experts. But that's sort of the voice that they're creating, they just follow the passion.
And we need that. We do need experts in the field to share what they know, right?
Totally.
And to be prioritized a lot of the time. I mean, I it's a really tricky topic to even navigate now, even just thinking about it, let alone talking about it on this podcast. Because I'm talking about imposter syndrome. Sometimes I'm like, well, I guess I'm not a real nonfiction writer. But then kids are like, but then I have pictures of screech owls,
right?
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And kids are like, oh, well, I can go see an owl. And I'm like, yeah, you. So I'm like, okay, so there's something fostered that's real, that's about real life, that's a curiosity for nature and, an interest in science and climate change. And I'm like, great. That was my goal, and it's not, I didn't want to write a message book, but I want to write something beautiful and meaningful and represent this true story.
And also the fact that like you wanted to write this story, you were inspired by it. It doesn't matter if you have a platform or not. And now these kids are sort of indirectly seeing that message also. Like I just thought this story was super inspiring and I thought I could write it and I did, and here it is, and I can hold it and give it to you. And like if you come across that in your life, you can do that too. Like if you want to do something and you're inspired and you're passionate, you can do it too. Like
look around, the stories are all around you. Yeah.
There has to be some of that, because it's like if you keep getting shut down by like, so many barriers or like rigid guidelines, or there's only 5 kinds of nonfiction. You know what I mean? Like you just will never, you'll never move beyond the entry point, right? Like you kind of have to try, and nothing bad about source books, like Josh said, right? They're just sort of curating.
We love for source books to buy stories we write.
No, totally. I just mean like, they're curating a very specific kind of nonfiction, and that's totally fine. But then, there's these other editors who are looking for another kind of nonfiction, which is also great. So like, we need both. Right. It's just, you don't want to get too hung up on those parameters.
Yeah.
Ultimately, to me, it's worth exploring because of producing books, right? Like we want to write stories that we're interested in. Kids are not going to care, for the most part, kids are not going to care who it is that has written the book and what their expertise is, except for, when part of the marketing of the book is that whoever wrote it is, spent 30 years, being the Jane Goodall of whatever it is that they're writing about. And that becomes the part of the selling point of the book. But again, and unless you have somebody like my oldest who would absolutely flip if they got to meet like some expert in some field that she was hyper focused in. I mean, ultimately, again, it's the story that matters. It's how the story connects with the audience. That's the most important thing.
Right.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about this even more. Because I grew up on poetry, as I mentioned, and I love to write poetry, and I try to read poetry every day. And is poetry nonfiction? What is it? And we don't have we have poetry for children, for sure. There's a whole world of poetry for children. But I always got so excited when my kids would say, oh, we're learning in poetry in school. And I would say, oh my gosh, I can't wait to see what you created or what you're reading. But the poetry that they were reading was very, dated and also dry and very restrictive, very tied to rhyming, which love rhyming poetry myself. But, I didn't love what they were reading. I just didn't find it creative. It was kind of the opposite of creative. To me, being really creative is to be free. Right? To be as free as you possibly can be. And I think that poetry offers that freedom and, freedom from all kinds of things, all kinds of restrictions. So, and that's true of our emotions too. It should free us. So I felt like in this writing of this book, this is poetry and no one knows how to classify it. So they call it nonfiction. And, I think it's nonfiction, but I also think it's other things all at the same time. And that's true of my second book as well. So for me, I'm excited to get a little bit more well-versed in this conversation because a little
nice reference to the name of the podcast.
Contribute
nice reference to
a verse that I'm versed in.
Yes.
I really need it. Now I need to talk about it and think about it and develop more opinions on it, I think, because I keep writing poems that are about real life. And I think that's what a lot of poems are. So I don't know if those are all nonfiction, but
fiction
poems,
of lived emotional experience, I guess.
Yeah, lived emotional experience. How does this connect to you? You know, how does the outside world connect to the internal world?
And I love this too in this like sort of landscape of, because my kid is 7, Josh's kids are similar age, but there's a lot of focus on SEL, right? Like social emotional learning. But yeah, this idea of poetry and this lived experience as an emotion in these poems, there's so much around, validating kids' emotions now and letting them feel the way they're feeling. These are all fine, right? So in that way, it's like you're validating their reality, and that is nonfiction, like that is the thing. So like there are all these nuances and pieces that I feel like we still don't have, We're still sort of discovering, but yeah, I love what you're saying about that. Like the emotional landscape, that's real. Like however you're feeling, that's your reality. That's justified. That is valid. Like you can feel those things. And here's the evidence. Here's this book that I wrote for you,
Right. Absolutely.
Put poetry in the nonfiction section.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Betsy Bird, if you're listening, start the movement.
Yeah.
Love Betsy Bird so much.
Our hour has evaporated, and Brent always does the it's crazy. Brent always does the wrap.
You guys are amazing.
Oh,
say more.
I want to talk.
Say more, Cedar.
No. No, you're wonderful. You have so many great questions.
My gosh.
And so many
thank
thoughts.
you.
It's kind of like a therapy session about creativity. Yeah,
that's right. But speaking of great questions, this is not a question, but a demand. We've referenced your next book a couple of times.
Yeah.
Say more about it. You've said it's about forests. We know David Litchfield, incredible illustrator, very lush illustration style. Say more about it.
It's going to take place in caves.
Ooh.
It's not about caves, but I was really excited that we have somebody who can do shadow so well. Shadow and light. This is called What Marcel Found, the incredible story of the LASCAUX cave paintings. And, or is it cave art? I'm always like, cave paintings.
What's your book title?
I got it right.
Right.
Cave paintings. But it's about a day in 1940 in France when this kid was taking a walk in the woods, and he, came across this tunnel and followed this tunnel, and he found 17,000-year-old cave art. And It was so beautiful and so much more complex and emotional than anything anyone thought we could have done, humans would have done in 17,000 years ago. 17,000 years ago, right?
Wow.
So like 5,000 years ago, they were starting to discover the alphabet, And like this is 17,000 years ago. And these are gorgeous illustrations of animals, and especially horses. There's like half of it is horses running all over these cave walls. And like Picasso, for instance, eventually saw it, and he was like, wow, we've learned nothing. He was like, there's not progress. It just changed the way people were thinking about expression, creativity, and humanity. But the thing is that this was 1940. It was occupied France, and the Nazis had occupied the land above this cave, right? They were in a war. And Marcel got 3 other boys from the village, I think kind of incidentally, and brought them into this situation. They all found it together. Basically, they got to this point together. And within a day, one of them had to flee the Nazis. Other kids were soon conscripted or somehow involved in World War II. It was such an impact. But those 3 of them spent a whole week keeping the secret of this cave and only letting kids see it and making them pay to see it. And
that's cool.
They knew immediately. They knew immediately that what they found was incredible. They knew instantly. They were looking for treasure, right? But they found something. They found something that was about being human at this time that was being about inhuman, where there were monsters everywhere, And I just, oh my gosh. Again, my daughter Pearl came home from 7th grade. She was like, did you know the kids found the LASCAUX cave art? And I was like, no. And there's these pictures of them. They're like 14, 15. They're smoking pipes because, they're French teenagers. And
right.
And I just thought, oh my gosh. And again, so this was almost the opposite of Fireflight, where Fireflight, I wrote a poem. My agent said, can you make it into a prose? With this, I wrote prose, and I just wrote it until it became more of a poem. And I could be free again and remove some of the cumbersome words that were keeping me back. And so I'm really excited about it. It's going to be great. It's coming out from Beachling Books. And I think, David Litchfield's going to be such an amazing illustrator for it. And I just want to, I'm like, I just want to take it to art museums, and I want to talk about art and expression and what creativity really is and where it comes from, and, and how it changed humanity's view of itself.
What an amazing, jumping off point. School visits are just going to be
so fun, right?
Impassioned and
I know.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Wow.
It's going to manifest it for you. French translation in the Louvre Museum shop. 100%.
I would love that so much. I was in London and I was at the kids section of, the Tate, and I was like, oh, what if someday I can hear what Marcel found, maybe.
That's amazing.
That'd be great.
Listeners, watch for that book coming 2026, right? It's going to be amazing. Wow. And Cedar, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a true delight. It's been amazing chatting with you.
Thank you both so much for this opportunity. It's so nice to have this creativity therapy with both of you.
Heck yes. Love it.